Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Haj-Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners.
Greetings to everyone. If this is the first time you're listening to our podcast, thank you for trying something new. I will reiterate, Ben and I are a pair of automotive journalists, but more important than that, we're really good friends. Isn't that right, Ben?
I question its importance, but yes.
I think it's important. I think it's what makes this podcast just flow and have energy and familiarity with the hosts, of course. We're not just two guys hired to be hosting this podcast and stuck together. We genuinely appreciate each other's conversation, right?
You know, a lot of things are important in this world, Sami. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. You can find Ben's work all over the internet. Why don't you plug a couple of the recent publications he's written for, Ben?
Sure, you can find my work at Motor Trend, at Capital One, and at Haggerty.
And you can find my work at autotrader.ca, driving.ca, and Capital One as well. Ben, we've got some EVs to talk about this week, including a quote-unquote affordable one.
I didn't think there were any affordable EVs left now that the Chevrolet Bolt has kind of limped off into the distance.
You're right. You're still right. This is just marketing speak for affordable comparative relative to other EVs, of course.
So are we talking about an EV that is comparable in price to what the Bolt was, but offers less range, maybe, and less power?
Yeah, both of those elements are correct.
Okay.
I mean, the 2024 Fiat 500e that I'm driving has a starting price of around $35,000.
Okay.
Which is nice.
I guess. I mean, that's about 5,000 more than the Bolt. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, about let's say about $5,000 less than the Bolt. And actually, you know what? I'm gonna take you back. I'm gonna take back a little.
It's actually $10,000 more than the Bolt.
Is that including incentives on your Bolt pricing?
I don't know. I'm seeing that the Bolt was $26,500 as the starting price.
My 500e, the particular one I have, which is called the Red Edition, is $34,000.
Okay.
And that's its deal. That's its big deal, okay?
So the Bolt that I'm talking about, just so people don't think I'm, that I have rose-colored glasses on, it was last sold new in 2023. So that's last year. You could get a Bolt for an MSRP of $26,500 from everything I'm seeing.
So let me tell you, not only is the Fiat 500e a bit more expensive than the Bolt,
30% more.
Yeah, it's also significantly less powerful.
Okay, I'm all in now.
It has less range and interior space. Okay,
so why the 500e? Like, I guess that's my first question. Like, what's the driving force behind Fiat saying, you know what, let's make something that's not competitive?
But I think well, first of all, there is no Bolt anymore.
But there's a Leaf, right?
There is a Leaf, and I think the Leaf is getting a little aged, okay?
Sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad option if you want, like, the cheapest EV. I guess is what I'm going
yeah, this will take on any sort of Leaf shopper who is concerned about how dorky it might look. Because the 500 has a lot of quirkiness and style. It looks cute, looks really like modern, but also retro at the same time. And that's its shtick, I'll tell you a little bit more about this car, and then we can really grill into it. 118 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but honestly, this car weighs under 3,000 pounds, which is an achievement given, its electric powertrain.
Do you want to give me those numbers again? The horsepower?
118.
Okay, so today I was working on a story that was talking about special edition trucks from the 90s, or just, unusual trucks from the 90s. And so back in 1997, GM made a all-electric version of the Chevrolet S10, which was a compact pickup.
Yeah, I know this, yes.
So this truck, it was front-wheel drive, which is unusual, obviously, because that's just how it was the EV1 drivetrain.
Basically,
They detuned it for this truck. They put 1,500 pounds of lead-acid batteries in the back, and they sold it. Do you want to know how much horsepower that vehicle had? 114.
114. So this Fiat has almost a little bit more horsepower than a 1990.
30 years later.
Okay. It has a lithium-ion battery. I mean, it has a 40 kilowatt hour battery, which is surprisingly, reserved for an electric vehicle, right?
Is it because the Fiat is just too small? Is this a very small vehicle?
Yeah, it's a two-door vehicle. It does have 4 seats. I don't think those rear seats are adult size, but you can also fold down the rear seats and get a little bit more cargo room, which I appreciated during my time with it. And it's rated for 149 miles of range, according to the EPA.
Okay.
I need to also tell you that it doesn't have the fastest DC fast charger.
I'm not at this point. Every time you tell me something about the Fiat that is like not quite up to par with the rest of the industry, I will have to feign surprise.
So it will take 35 minutes to charge from 0 to 80.
It's tiny battery.
It's tiny battery.
Okay.
But I will tell you, there are a few things in here that were surprising. It's got a wireless phone charger. It's got wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support. It's got a 10-inch infotainment screen as well as a digital gauge cluster.
Is that surprising in a $35,000 vehicle, though?
No, I guess you're right. I mean, for a car that's usually, subcompact cars, let's be clear, is a dead market in North America, right? Kind of, yeah. When they were around, they were usually Spartan. They usually didn't have any of these great features.
Well, you can still get a Versa for like less than 20,000, I think.
That's the one. We need to get the one. We need to get the one, I guess. And to see this kind of features, we got rain sensing windshield wipers, we got lane keeping assist, we've got style, and an interior that doesn't feel as cheap as a subcompact car typically does. I basically am trying to tell you right now that this is like you said, an alternative to the Leaf that makes some compromises in order to be more appealing, style wise or function, or not functionality wise, but style wise, and that's it really, right?
Sami,
big sigh. Yeah.
Why buy this car? Like, nothing that you've described really gets me interested in this vehicle. Like, we're in that situation again where the market has moved forward and there's a car company that has decided to it really reminds me of the CX the MX-30.
Yeah, I'm actually writing a story about these two vehicles because and I think we need to talk about the Mini EV, what's it called? Cooper SE?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at it right now. So the electric hardtop two-door, it has 114 miles of range. What's you said 149 for the Fiat?
Yeah.
It costs 31,000. So it's cheaper.
It's
considerably cheaper.
Yep.
And it doesn't say it does 60 in 6.9 seconds. I don't know how fast the
Fiat 500, I've read some measurements on like Car and Driver, will do it around 7-ish.
Okay, so exactly the same. And it's 36 minutes to charge on a quick charge, but it doesn't say if that's to 80% or not. I'm going to assume it is, but it's not listed.
The main thing, though, is that these are considered city cars. I think that's the element here. And I think EVs, might sound probably like common sense now, but maybe it's not. But EVs perform significantly better in city scenarios. And when you have one that's about this size, the efficiency just feels much nicer.
Now, I don't have a problem with the idea of a city EV. I think that's a cool slice of the market.
34,000.
Not at this price.
Yeah, this needs to be at least $5,000 cheaper.
Yeah, it needs to be 29. Like, I would feel okay. I mean, realistically, I want it at 25. If I'm going to buy something that has half the range, and that's on a good day, half the range of a car that costs almost the same amount, that feels silly to me.
My understanding is that the 500e is eligible for the recent EV incentives, which means that'll cut, I think, $7,500 from the price. Which
the Bolt was eligible for those as well, and it meant you could get a Bolt for $19,000. Which is where what we were talking about earlier. We're like, hey, what's a good price for a subcompact car? It's almost like it's possible to build a cheap electric car, and only one company tried to do it, and then quickly decided that it wasn't a good idea.
Well, maybe they weren't making money on it. We don't know.
Maybe they weren't. It's entirely possible. I don't know how much.
That is an important thing to bring up because the first 500e, which I think was about 10 years ago, maybe 7 years ago.
No, I think you're right. 10. I think 10 is right.
Was a compliance car, and the CEO at the time,
Sergio Marchionne,
famously said, "Please do not buy this car. We are losing money on every single one."
I think it had like 400 pound-feet of torque too.
It was insane. It was crazy.
You can buy them for like 6,000 or 7,000. Friend of the podcast, Derek Powell. He had one this summer because he was in between cars for a while, and he really liked it. They're cheap, they're relatively fun. But the problem was when he bought it, he had to break up his drive home over the course of like 2 days because it doesn't have fast charge capability, and it has like the tiniest range. I want to say 65 miles or something. And he bought it in like Northern California, and he had to get it back to LA, and it just took forever to do.
You're not going to have that compromise anymore with this vehicle, I don't think. But
let's be clear, Sammy, this new Fiat 500e is also a compliance car. Like, there's nothing about it that says it's not.
Absolutely.
Is it available for sale in every market in the US?
As far as I understand, yeah. Yeah.
Are you sure?
No, but I think so.
All right. I'm going to find out.
Do it. You tell me. But I believe that it is available everywhere. But this price is out of control, and I really wish that it wasn't because I really enjoyed being in it. I loved, using it around town. It was totally functional for somebody who just, has everything in a fairly large town. But that price is like I said, at least if not $10,000 too expensive. It's just too much.
So is there anything about this vehicle that you liked?
Yeah, like I said, I think it's the usual enjoyment factor of a subcompact car in which that it fits everywhere. It's easy to drive. It's got great visibility. I told you that it has really good features. It looks cute. Every time I looked at it, I kind of like smirked and smiled. It's got a front end that looks like a human face in a way. Like it's got.
No, that's I don't need that. I don't need that like Tom Hanks Polar Express front end. I'm good.
It's more like a Pixar car sort of thing. But
you're not selling me on it.
I just really enjoyed that element of it, and you add those like subcompact car dynamics of being really accessible in the city with the fact that it has really good responsiveness and acceleration for those speeds, and it's just enjoyable to be in. It's unusually enjoyable to be in, which is because I think I'm used to bigger EVs with bigger batteries that, they're really good. They've got great range, excellent power. They're big and spacious, but they can also feel like lumbering at times, especially in a tight city. And I think, I moved out of Toronto into another big city called Hamilton, which also has a fairly dense downtown core. And I find that the 500e just feels really comfortable in these spaces. And I was just happy with driving it because every time I would run my errands around town, I would come home and I'd notice that the range estimate has really not dropped that much, even though I was out in the car all day.
Yeah, but
because
that kind of like. Sorry, go on.
Just because you're in a dense city and you're recuperating, you're not spending. Sorry, you're not. Accelerating up to really high speeds, which is where the efficiency of an EV really falls apart.
But I think it also shows you how little actual distance you travel in a city, despite being out there for a long period of time.
Yeah. I mean, I was traveling maybe, I would say 6-ish, 7-ish miles, and still like little stints here and there, and still not getting a percentage drop on the meter, right? And I'm like, hey. If I'm running my errands around town like this, there's nothing. These things are great for that. And charging it at home, I don't have a level 2 charger like you do. And most of the time when I get home from picking up a vehicle, an EV, I get home and my range is down to like, let's say 50%. And I have to spend the next maybe 2 days charging it back up to 100.
You don't just find like a fast charger nearby?
No. And that's just to get up to 100. I don't really need to get it up to 100 or whatever. But the 500e, because it has such a small battery, it charges back up to 100 really quickly. And I found it, like that was wonderful. Like there's elements of this car that work. If this car was $10,000 cheaper, it would be brilliant, right?
So it is sold in every state, including Puerto Rico. But if you go to like the Fiat USA website, the little blurb in Google, when you search for Fiat 500, it says, engineered to be stylish, exciting city car with 1.1 billion miles of testing already traveled. Why are you telling me that?
I guess, yeah. Now, the other thing that worth mentioning is of course that, I see small EVs in other markets. I was in the Middle East earlier this year, and there's a lot of small subcompact EVs there, mostly from like Asian manufacturers that we don't get in North America. And I'm assuming those are cheaper than this 500e, but it just reminded me again that, small cars, especially in the EV powertrain, can be functional and useful to the right buyer in the right conditions.
But
I really don't think this is going to work here unless you get it super cheap. And, as that shows with people who have had good experiences with the used 500Es with really limited range, they're still functional, totally cool cars.
So I'm just, casting my net around. We talked about how the electric Mini Cooper is probably what Fiat thinks it's competing with, right? In terms of directness, both are roughly the same size. They have very similar,
roughly the same price, range.
Yeah, the Mini is, as we mentioned, $5,000 cheaper.
Yep.
But everything else lines up. And then you look at something like the Kona Electric,
which
is $32,875, 261 miles of range, which is more than double, isn't it? No,
it's about 100 miles.
100 miles more, 201 horsepower.
Yeah, and much more functional in every way.
Much more functional, but still not big. It doesn't have the lumbering aspect that you were talking about before. Like, it's still sized underneath the huge weight point that we have with so many SUVs these days that have batteries, I think.
Mm-hmm. So what's the size of the battery on that? 60 kilowatts? 60 kilowatt hour?
I don't know. That's a good question. It doesn't say on the page exactly that I'm looking at. I can try and find out, though.
Yeah, me too. And I think the Nero is the other one. Wow, this one actually says... What? There's 2 batteries in the model? That can't be true.
Where are you seeing that? I'm seeing a 68 kilowatt. There's 2 versions. That's
what I'm saying.
Yeah, you didn't know about that?
I didn't know that there was another model.
So the cheaper model, I believe, is not available in Canada.
Okay.
So there's
a 48.6 kilowatt hour
that has
battery.
200 miles of range. And that's still better.
So that's 50 miles more than this Fiat 500.
Yes. And
that's the one you're getting with that cheap price that you mentioned.
Sure.
32.
But if you're spending Fiat money, the bigger battery is still available at $36,875. Like, it's not like you're going to be,
Yeah. Yep. I agree with you there, but it's a 4-door compared to like a 2-door, so there's a bit of like a style thing that changes between them.
It's a different vehicle, but it falls under we're talking about cheap electrics that are...
But yeah, it no longer feels like a city car. It's a subcompact EV.
I can't make a single argument as to why you would buy either the Mini or the Fiat instead of this. Like, it just
unless you just need a car that size. You want the car that size, right?
I guess so. I mean, if
you don't need a car that size.
If you want something, then yeah, that's what you're going to buy. But want is not a logical argument.
Absolutely.
We can't control what people want. I mean, if we did, we would not be doing a podcast.
Is the lease on this thing affordable? Is attractive in any way?
No idea. But it has the same, $7,500 credit, I think.
Yeah.
So again, now you're below $20,000 for both of those models.
I'm going to check here. What's going on? Is there a Fiat? Yeah, okay. Why don't you tell me what you're doing, what you're driving?
Well, no, we're still talking about the Fiat, aren't we? I mean, you haven't really said anything about it. It's like
$190 per month.
I've talked some crap about it. And then you said, well, it's kind of okay. And I like that it's small. And I was like, all right. But
no.
Would you ever recommend someone buy this?
No, not at all. Unless you could get it for $10,000 cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, even then, though.
No, that it's cute and quirky in the right ways.
Okay, would you buy it versus a used Bolt?
No.
Okay.
What about the Bolt? Which one had Super Cruise? Bolt
the
EUV?
EUV, which has slightly less range and is a little bit more expensive.
That's the one I would buy.
Like $2,000 more. Why would you buy that one?
How much are these things? Because of Super Cruise. I just said so.
I guess, but you know what's weird is the EUV, which is supposed to be the SUV version of the Bolt, has
It's
less
smaller,
cargo
yes,
space
I
inside.
know.
So you're really just buying it for the Super Cruise, I guess.
I know.
Okay.
I'm gonna see how much they are around here.
Yeah.
Wow, I should buy one of these. Holy cow! Why didn't you tell me to buy one of these like a year ago?
I'm 100% sure you could go to a Chevy dealership and find a leftover Bolt for a good price. I'm sure they would pay you handsomely to take it off their hands. I mean, the downside.
But you know what? The funny thing is, I'm looking at a year-old Bolt EUV with like, let's say 2 years worth of range of driving on it, like mileage wise, like 20-ish thousand miles.
Okay.
And I'm still spending 30 grand Canadian.
I mean, 30 grand Canadian is not, that's like 24 US.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a pretty substantial discount.
83,000 kilometers on your Bolt EUV and still selling it for over 25,000.
I mean, that's the asking price. And I don't think you should look at Canadian pricing for EVs because, as we both know, it's completely out of whack because, unlike the United States, people want them and supply is limited as a result. I mean, we don't have EVs sitting in dealerships waiting for buyers. It's just not like that. There's waiting lists on all of the popular ones. And it's like that for plug-in hybrids as well, because we have a very robust incentives program. Like if you buy a new electric vehicle in Quebec, for example, until the end of this year, you can get something like $16,000 or $17,000 off the price. Like it's nuts, depending on the model. Some of them are like 12 and some of them are 15. It's depends on how it qualifies. But that's a huge discount. So of course people suddenly a vehicle that costs $50,000 is like 35. That's much more reasonable. But with the Bolt,
but that doesn't help with this 500e situation for whatever reason, does it?
You would probably get the same kind of discounts, but I don't know what the Canadian pricing is for the. I mean, if it's 35 US, it's. I mean, you're the one who's driving it. Shouldn't you know how much it costs in Canada?
I've had a long week. Okay, you want me to tell you how much it costs in Canada?
Sure.
37. What? 48?
37.
Was that a guess?
Yeah, it was a guess.
Okay, 37, including the $5,000 incentive.
So it's not 37, it's 42.
It is, yes, 42.
Okay. So in Quebec, it would probably be around 30.
That's okay.
No.
Not great.
Not great.
But every car is over $30,000 right now. So
yeah, but I don't have a problem.
I drove a Canadian, the Canadian pricing of the Civic hatchback hybrid that I drove a few weeks ago was more than this, right? $40,000.
Yeah, we talked about that being a problem, but I don't have a problem with a good EV being more than $30,000.
One that is compromised in every way to be a Fiat 500 is a problem.
There's a huge difference. Like I think that the Kona is very well priced. Conversely, I think that the Kona does not do well when compared against the Ioniq 5, which is only a little bit more money for, I think, a lot more vehicle. But at that point, it's nice to have a choice. You know what I mean? Whereas with Mini and Fiat, it's like, this is what you get. Although Mini does offer the All-4, which is, I do not know exactly how much more money, but considerably more, I think. And I believe that has more range and more everything because of the larger platform.
Okay. So that seems like a better pick all around.
Yeah, so the Countryman All-4 electric version has 212 miles of range, 5.4 seconds to 60.
It's a much bigger vehicle. A Countryman is hard to compare to a.
And but I'm just saying you have the option. In the Fiat showroom, you don't have that. Fiat is a single vehicle seller. I mean, they have the now just the regular 500 and the electric 500. They don't.
I mean, I don't even know they sell the regular 500 anymore.
No idea. When's the last time you were in a Fiat dealership?
I don't think they have it.
When's the last time you saw a Fiat dealership?
I don't know where you would even buy one. You're right.
It's a problem.
One of the things I found interesting is that there's not even a Fiat badge on the front of the car. It just says 500 on the fake grille. So I think they're running away from that now.
I know I had read that what had originally happened was when Fiat came to North America, they promised a lot of existing Chrysler franchise holders that because it was FCA at the time, that if they got on board with Fiat, that eventually the lineup would expand to include more than just the 500.
Yeah.
Like they were going to come in with the 500 and then they were going to become a full lineup automaker.
Well, then there was the 500X, 500L, and what is the name of the Miata? The 124?
But what you're missing out here, Sammy, is that all of those have the word 500 in them, right?
Yes.
Except for the clone of the Mazda Miata.
Yeah.
And what a lot of franchisees did was they built out individual dealerships thinking that this was going to be a new business for them in the sense that over time it would grow. And it made sense to build a whole dealership around it. And then that didn't happen. And it caused a lot of strife internally for FCA with its dealers. I don't know if there was a buyout situation where they were, because too many people built Fiat dealerships to begin with. And then you had the fact that they didn't really have any product to sell. And that product didn't really change over time. So what
makes it worse is looking across the world and you seeing that 500s and Fiats are available in different markets with different brandings and different names and different products. And just being like, you won't get any of that.
Well, okay? I think some of this was a victim of the fact that all of these car companies in North America decided they only wanted to build SUVs, and Fiat didn't have any SUVs to sell, right? And the ones that they did have to sell, they had already done a partnership with Jeep. So when we got the Jeep Renegade, which is based on a Fiat model, I believe, I don't think that Jeep was excited about saying, okay, we're going to have a Renegade and then Fiat can have an identical vehicle that will steal sales from us, right? So it gets all political and weird, and Fiat gets the short end of the stick, and here we are.
Yeah, totally. This is, I feel bad for the brand. I feel bad for the product because I think the product isn't, has potential at the right price point. But, yeah, you're right. There's better options all around. I wouldn't pick a Leaf over this unless I was desperate for the range of, and maybe, I guess, reputation of the Nissan Leaf.
I'm going to be driving, well, not just the range though, but Sammy, isn't the Leaf larger inside? It's a 4-door hatchback, so it's a little more practical. Yeah. Do you think that would make a difference for some buyers?
For some buyers, absolutely. But I think, like I said, for a city car, of which there are very few choices, that the 500e just feels right in a city, in a dense city.
So I'm going to be driving one next month.
Okay.
And I'm curious to see what's going to happen because I live, 75 miles from the city. And when I get home, I'm assuming there's going to be less than 50% range.
Yeah, there's going to be way less than 50%
So range. I want to see how practical it is. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's something I could use as a commuter car because if I was to go to the closest, both of the largest cities that are closest to me are essentially equidistant. So I don't think I could do a there and back trip without having to charge. And to me, that's
going to be so frustrating for you.
Yeah. So I think that's a deal breaker.
Why are you doing that to yourself?
The other issue is once winter comes,
you're
going to be losing 40% of this range, I'm assuming.
At least, yeah.
So then can I make
at most, I think.
Can I make a single trip?
I don't think so, man.
Wow. That's rough.
I don't think so.
That's rough. I mean, I didn't even think about that until now. Just how much temperature is going to affect. I mean, you add temperature in and all of a sudden you're almost back to the original 500e's range.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that you know what? Now that you make those points, there's no way you can recommend this thing.
In a city,
there's absolutely no. This is, and even in a city, this is where the price doesn't matter to the buyer. In
a city, you'll never drive 50 miles in a day. You're just not going to do it.
Yeah, but a lot of city people who live in the city might not ever want a car either, right? Like if they have a city that has really decent, halfway decent public transit, what are we spending $35,000 on a car for?
And then you start to
this
think
is only for the rich people in the city, right?
Yeah, it's a graduation gift for a wealthy son or daughter.
$190 monthly lease is a little attractive. It's okay.
That's like half a bus pass.
Yeah,
right. Like I think so.
That's the lease price, which is okay.
And you couldn't even sell this vehicle to fleets because, the ride-sharing services in cities, they have a lot of these small city cars, but there's no way to charge them reliably because people just leave the cars wherever. It's like those bird scooters, right? Where like people just
oh my God.
chuck them into the canal or something. Like
you hate these things. They're not my favorite at all. I see them littering the sidewalks and stuff.
They were
And I
banned in
think people
Montreal because
driving riding really dangerously with them, and I was so concerned that someone's gonna get really hurt.
they were banned in Montreal because people just left them everywhere, but it created this real accessibility problem for people who had mobility issues. So if you're in a wheelchair or you have crutches or something and you can't get around them on the sidewalk, and it became even more problematic in the winter where like even if you're on a wide sidewalk and someone's chucked a scooter there, oftentimes there's just no way to get around, period. So Montreal was like, this is a nightmare. We're getting rid of these. And thank you for that. I mean, one of the few good decisions Montreal's made about transportation in the last decade.
That's it. I mean, it's fair to say this is a non-competitive vehicle that only appeals to people with extra cash in their pocket, and they want a city plaything to be seen in, I guess, in a cute way, like a fashion accessory.
It's like the opposite of a Smart 4.2 EV, where like you don't want to be seen in it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I also drove an electric vehicle, and it's one that Sami, you drove very recently, but I drove a different version of that vehicle, and I think in some ways it makes a pretty big difference in how I approached it. I'm talking about the Acura ZDX. We talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, so I'm not going to go into super in-depth on it. But there's a couple of points that I want to bring up that I think really struck me while it was in my possession. So for those who maybe didn't listen to the other episode, Sami, you drove the Type S, right? Which has 500 horsepower and something like 550 pound-feet of torque or more than that?
Yeah. I think it's closer to 550, but yes.
Okay. So,
I drove the Type S, and I mentioned that there's a lot of decent elements of this car, but I found it a bit expensive and lacking the accurateness.
Yeah, so this vehicle is like the Honda Prologue, based on a General Motors platform, the Ultium platform that they use for the Blazer and a bunch of other stuff, Cadillac Lyriq. This is done because Honda does not have an in-house electric vehicle program in North America, and yet they face regulations in places like California where you have to have EVs in the showroom, you have to have zero emissions vehicles. So they made this partnership to create their own vehicle based on someone else's technology. I drove the A-Spec. I drove specifically the A-Spec all-wheel drive. In the United States, you can get a rear-wheel drive version as well. In Canada, it's just the A-Spec all-wheel drive and the Type S. There were a few things about the Type S that Sami liked, like it has a version of a Super Cruise, the self-driving system from General Motors, which works very, very well. It has a self-parking feature. It has the extra power and torque. The A-Spec doesn't have any of that. It comes close in the horsepower department. It's 490 horsepower.
Yeah, come on. That's nothing compared to 500, right? Like, the difference between 490 and 500 is nothing. That's
but the larger difference is 437 pound-feet of torque.
Yeah, so compared to like 5-something. Yeah, it's huge.
And so when you look at like the most powerful version of the Cadillac Lyriq, which also has 500 horsepower, the torque is also in a similar ballpark. It has like 100 more pound-feet of torque. So this is kind of a weird implementation that's like, it's like a middle child. It's kind of stuck where it can't offer all the cool stuff that the Type S does. It's not quite as cheap as the base version of the ZDX, but it's still expensive. This is a $70,000 vehicle. And all the things that you said, Sami, about how the Type S doesn't really feel like an Acura inside, like it's almost entirely GM parts bin stuff, and very similar to the Honda Prologue, which also shares the same parts bin. That's the same problem with the A-Spec. It also, something I found...
Can you better articulate what I said? I was like, I remember saying this to somebody, and they're like,
it just doesn't feel like an Acura. Like, you're paying a $70,000 luxury vehicle price, which is more, I might add... The Acura ZDX across the board is more expensive than the Cadillac Lyriq, which is the luxury version of the same platform from General Motors.
And battery, yeah.
And yet it costs more. And it doesn't deliver the same nice interior that you get from the Cadillac at any price point. On the outside, it looks maybe better, depending on how you feel about the design. I think that the ZDX is a fairly handsome vehitle.
I agree. I think the exterior is probably the best part of the ZDX. The Lyriq, I've seen them a couple around town, and there's something about that. There's something about its rear proportions that just like, why does it look like that? It looks like a wagon from certain angles, like in a non-flattering way. And I think the ZDX avoids that.
I just don't understand what would compel someone to pay more for less when you could get the same thing out of a Cadillac, or you could get something better out of, say, a Genesis electrified GV70, which is also less expensive.
And is, unique, is made by the company that sells it. You know
sure,
what I mean?
It's made by the company that sells it, but not only that, it's a much better vehicle. It just looks better inside and out, has more features, it's more interesting to drive. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with the ZDX, but there's no reason to buy it, and it's not an Acura. I don't think it helps Acura in any meaningful sense. Like, I think that if you were an Acura superfan and you bought this vehicle and you took it home, you would probably be okay with it, but it would not be exciting for you. It doesn't drive in an engaging way. It doesn't particularly offer you a lot of utility. Like, if you compare it to an MDX, which is the gas 3-row crossover SUV from Acura.
And formerly hybrid, right? A very good,
they made a hybrid version.
Fun to drive hybrid version of it.
But
right?
the point I want to make is they're the same size, roughly, but the ZDX is much smaller inside. I don't know whether it's because of battery placement or not, but it's only like 63 cubic feet of cargo space versus 95 in the MDX. So you're not even getting that much practicality. I will say that compared to the Cadillac Lyriq that I drove, it did not squeak or rattle in the same way, and I didn't have any of those. Too, right? I didn't have those mysterious humming sounds that I had from the front of the vehicle. The weird metal.
You said there was a weird noise.
There was a weird noise off throttle occasionally at certain speeds when the regen kicked in, but in the Cadillac, I had a metal on metal sound coming from the front of the vehicle that was
way worse,
scary. Yeah.
Okay. Did you notice the fun noise it makes at low speeds?
It's like so strange. It's like a little song. It plays a little song. I actually like that.
The halo sound, it always feels like you're being blessed, like, from God.
It has 300 miles of range, which is fine. It's like just over, I think it's 499 or 501 kilometers every time I charged it up. It charges at 190 kilowatts, which again, not really luxury territory.
Not class leading, very average, right?
Very average, but you're linked to the General Motors technology. I mean, Acura can't change anything about that. So Acura's in this weird situation where, they can make a Type S version that is ostensibly a high-performance vehicle, and they can kind of wax over the less Acura parts of it by making it, I think, the most powerful version of the Ultium platform that you can get in that form factor. But when you walk away from the Type S and you're in the A-Spec, you don't have any of that, and it really becomes a much more mediocre experience. In Canada, the pricing is really high. It's $87,000 for the A-Spec. I just can't understand the appeal at that price point. There are just so many better choices. Again, not that the ZDX is a bad vehicle, but it's in a really tough spot.
It's perfectly average but is a luxury car, and you can't get by with perfectly average with a luxury vehicle. You should be
buying if that strategy works for Honda with the Prologue. I think it's okay that the Prologue is average. Like, that is.
And especially at the lease price that they were giving, right?
Exactly. But with the ZDX, if you want something special, I mean, it looks sharp, but once you get beyond that, the speed of the vehicle, it's relatively quick, but it doesn't handle like you would think an Acura handles. I mean, it's 6,000 pounds. I mean, that's 3 tons of vehicle. It's just not going to give you anything resembling razor sharp reflexes. So it puts in a fine, soft experience. And I had no trouble with anything about it. Like the controls, everything worked. It was functional. It was comfortable, relatively quiet. But at its price point, I can't recommend it. I mean, I wouldn't discourage someone from buying it. I would probably tell them, hey, make sure you drive literally anything else that's luxurious and electric at that price point, because you'll be surprised by how different it will feel from the ZDX. But it's not compelling enough to recommend.
Okay. There's a lease promotion. Now, here's the thing. I think I've started paying attention a little bit more, because ever since that Prologue story about how much cheaper the Prologue is to lease than own, I've been taking a look at these EV lease rates. The ZDX's lease rate is, for the most basic model, which is a rear-wheel drive version of the car, $389 per month for 27 months, which is a very strange time for me. I don't understand.
I think that gets you until the next year from now.
Okay.
I think, because we're almost 3 months from the end of the year, right? So,
yes,
I know it seems very arbitrary.
$389 a month.
Okay, so and then you have to get a new car January 1st, 2028.
Yeah, and hopefully Honda will have their new, or Acura will have their real EV by then.
Hopefully the showroom's open.
Yes. My other thought, of course, was, what do you do Look, we've seen badge engineered cars before, and I think that service sometimes can be a difficult thing to deal with. Is there GM specific tools that need to be used or licensed or something like that?
Sammy, this is the beautiful thing about Ultium is you can just take your Acura to any Chevy dealership and get.
No, they won't touch it, will they?
You don't know until you try.
Exactly, you don't know until you try. And what will happen assuming you still have your car in I don't know 10, 20 years?
20 years.
They still have that tool.
Sammy,
20
right? years from now, the icebergs and glaciers have melted, and you're going to be in a boat. Looking down through a glass bottom at your ZDX at the bottom of the ocean. I have a family
now, and I've been thinking about this future, this bleak future Sammy, we have.
Your child will be on the moon in one of the colonies. You don't have to worry about that. But you can't afford
to go to the moon.
That's
what we're saving our money for.
You can't afford to go to the moon because you made bad choices during the good times.
That's right.
I'm sorry. Your wife and your child are on the moon. You're on the Earth. I guess harvesting water to survive. I don't know.
That sounds like a good life.
Yeah,
20 years from now, it's sure.
Definitely a life.
It's better than living. Yeah. I mean, better than not living.
Sure. Let's go with that.
Did you find the infotainment system arbitrary and weird, or the gauge cluster any different?
I found the gauge cluster to be kind of boring, but it was fine. The infotainment system was equally fine, no real problems with it. What really struck me, so I have a review client that asks me to talk specifically about technology features that are like unique or interesting for that model, and there were none. There's zero. Yeah. Like there's nothing that the ZDX does that other EVs don't do, and it doesn't have like the Super Cruise thing that I was mentioning before that is a really unique offering. So
on the Type S.
Yeah. So the A-Spec is it's a car. It's fine. You know, the pricing does not reflect what you're getting.
Not at all.
In my opinion.
I agree. We're at this again.
So like, in Canada, do you want to hear what the monthly lease is on the A-Spec?
Oh, it's nonsense. Like $1,000.
$1,353. And that's for 48 months.
How is that? How could there be such a difference between the Canadian and U.S. markets?
It's demand. It's demand. It's all demand.
Yeah. So we've come to the conclusion that there are like our episode is like we drove EVs that were too expensive and not useful enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ZDX is better than the Fiat 500 from what you described because
it has the power, it has the range, it has the charging speed, and
Yeah, I could theoretically drive to another city in it, which I can't do from where I live in the Fiat.
Yes.
Which is why I booked it before the winter happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well done. Okay. Anything else you want to say?
Sorry to everyone who listened and we weren't excited about these vehicles. I mean...
I was until I started really thinking about how compromised the vehicle would be in the winter.
It was the same for me. I was writing this ZDX review this week and I kept thinking about all the point you made about how it's just not an Acura and it's quite pricey, and I couldn't get around that. Like once that got into my head, I'm like, man, the Cadillac is so much cheaper. It's like,
this is an interesting thing though, and I've said this to other people, and I don't know if they register what I mean by this, but like a lot of EVs feel really similar. They just feel like that electric torque, bam, hits you. You've got that range, great. You have that charge speed, okay. And now they're all in this like bubble of like, we're all very similar to each other. And as a result, people are just buying what's available to them. There are very few EVs that feel like a luxury product.
Yeah.
I'll say the Porsche and Audi e-tron GT and Taycan are very, to me, they feel special.
I think BMW and Genesis have really locked it down as well.
I'm not sure about Genesis. I think that Genesis can sometimes, especially the GV60, can just feel like a barely fancier Ioniq 5. GV70 I kind of liked, and G80 I really liked because it had tons of range for that body style. And then I think you're stuck with like the EV exclusive brands like Tesla, Rivian. What is the other one that's really Lucid?
Lucid's in another universe of pricing.
Yeah.
But, if you look at something like a ZDX and you compare it to an R1S.
Yeah, I would way rather get a Rivian, right?
Yeah, I mean, a Rivian definitely has personality. And this vehicle does not so much have that.
So now we're stuck in a situation where the established brands are scrambling to put together an EV, and not just and that's it, an EV. Any EV will do. That's what I mean. Obviously, Acura chose. I think they chose a pretty good. If they could have partnered with anybody, GM has plenty of experience and
although the Ultium rollout has been super problematic, as we pointed out.
But we've got, I mean, build quality wise, you had no issues with the ZDX compared to what you had with the Lyric.
Yeah.
There was no, so, Acura.
They're made at the same plant, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on there.
But now we're stuck with this element of now they've got their first EV out. How will they inject a brand into this? How will they inject value into this? What does Acura have to offer? And it's not just Acura, it's all the other the luxury nameplates. How will they do this?
Yeah.
What is Acura, and how do you take that into an EV? Because we're not satisfied. You and I are not satisfied, right?
No, but I mean, that's been a problem since day one for all these companies, because suddenly 100 years of institutional knowledge for building drivetrains goes out the window.
Yeah, but what did we like about...
Those drivetrains were a huge part of the personality of luxury cars.
Okay, fair. But I think we've recently said, I mean, not just you and I, but the media as a whole has said Acura has a winner with one specific vehicle, and that was the Integra, and I think especially the Integra Type S.
Yeah.
Which was a manual. I understand that's a huge part of the charm.
But if we're talking about branding, really Acura is a poor example, because Acura hasn't had an identity for at least a decade, if not more.
They've tried so hard.
But
they brought back the NSX.
Sure.
I mean, I know you didn't enjoy it, but some people obviously.
But what's the identity of the NSX? Like a video game? Like it's
it's a high tech.
There's that vehicle showboat. Leaves me completely cold. There's nothing about it that I can connect with.
Yes, but that's for you. I think for certain buyers, they will find that high tech element of it, the design.
Yes. Some people like a completely disconnected V6 and 3 electric motor approach to speed. Sure. I'm sure those people are out there.
Yeah, they are.
That's why it's become a modern classic, and everyone's always talking about it.
I see. But anyways, it's something that I think, there are some automakers that have clearly managed to figure out their EV identity, and then there's other ones that are really just floundering and trying to get a product in the showroom at any cost.
Yeah. And Acura is a company that's kind of removed more cars from its lineup than it's added, I think, over the last decade. The RLX and the TSX and the TL, and they started combining stuff together, and they have an abbreviated lineup. And I mean,
but I like the RDX. I like the MDX, and they achieve what they're supposed to achieve.
That is the lowest possible bar.
No, but I actually really do enjoy driving the RDX. I enjoy driving the MDX, and they're spacious, they're practical, they're fun. The only thing I don't like is their user interface of a bajillion buttons.
I don't have a problem with these vehicles, but I think it's very difficult to argue that they have personality or a strong identity.
Okay.
And that's not unique to Acura, but I think it's been a stone around Acura's neck for quite a long time.
That's fair. I just don't know how they're going to continue. I don't know how they're going to make an Acura, especially when, as you just mentioned now, that they've been without a brand identity for so long.
Well, I mean, you talk about how good the Integra Type S is, and it really is. Can they make a small, engaging to drive EV? Because no one else is really doing that.
I think the Model 3 counts. A lot of people have told me it's fun.
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, I'm not really into discussing the fascist cars.
Yeah, I know. So, I understand, of course.
The BMW i4 is close, I guess, but it's not as small as the Integra.
Yep.
So
that's a good point.
I feel like there's space there, and instead of trying to do what everyone else is doing, maybe look for a niche and then explode inside that niche. Or, I mean, obviously, we're talking about a company that does not have an EV platform in this country. So they can't really do any of what we're talking about.
I mean, their other EV platform is a joint venture, a Chinese joint venture.
Yeah. So is that the N600 or whatever it is?
No, the ENP1 or ENRP1.
ENP1?
Yeah.
You can't call vehicles ENP1.
What is it called?
No, I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying, it seems like a bad branding exercise to just throw random letters together. It
really is called the ENP1 and the, hold on, ENP2.
I mean...
ENS too.
All right. I've said enough. I don't have anything left on the ZDX.
If any of you listeners want to talk to us about how these EVs are completely flubbing these automakers are flubbing their personality in the transition to electrification, send us a message. We have a ton of ways to get in touch with us. You can reach out to us on our website. It's unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. There's a contact form there. You fill that out, and it lands in our inbox, and we usually end up discussing what you have to say. So long as it's not profane or belligerent, we usually do talk about it.
It's never been profane or belligerent. Why did you have to bring that up? Why are you tickling the dragon?
Additionally, you can reach out to us just via email if you prefer that. It's benjamin@benjaminhunting.com, or you can find us on social media. We prefer Instagram. You can find Ben at huntingbenjamin, or you can find me at Sami_ha, like you're laughing.
Sammy, what are you gonna be talking about next week?
I'm trying to get my hands on a pickup truck so I can buy some more backyard stuff.
Don't you have an Outback?
So hopefully I got a pickup truck. Yeah, but that's my family car. I don't want to get that dirty.
Wow. Okay.
Actually, I bought so much soil.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Your Majesty.
Have you bought soil before?
I have. It's always wet. Have you noticed that?
And there's always like the tiniest hole in the bag.
Well, at least one hole.
That completely screws your car over.
It's almost like you know when you go to the grocery store and you buy something that was previously frozen and it hasn't like completely thawed yet.
Yeah.
All the dirt I buy feels like that. It feels like they put it on a pallet in the sun. So I bought some. This wasn't dirt, but bear with me. I bought some gravel because I had I live on a gravel road and my driveway is paved. But like,
why did you just take some from the road?
Because Sammy, I need to drive on that road. And anyway, the interface between my driveway and the road had like some holes in it. So I wanted to fill with gravel so that they stop filling with water. So I buy this gravel and it's been sitting out in the sun. And I don't know if it's like just condensation from wet gravel or something, but each of the bags is just soaking wet inside. And like I used a pickup truck so that it wouldn't get wet inside my vehicle and just like complete huge mess. And it's just gravel. It's not even dirt. Anyway, gravel ran over, I guess, but.
No, yeah. So yeah, my Outback is now, I've realized it's full of soil now. So
you could have put something down on like the cargo area, right?
It was a spontaneous
purchase. Dirt purchase. Was there a dirt sale?
There wasn't.
How much?
All the garden stuff is on sale.
How much of a discount do you need before you make a spontaneous dirt purchase? Like what was
you know me, man.
60% off.
Yeah, at least
$1 per hectare.
Okay, you know what? The listeners are going to come on my side on this. They're going to say the same thing.
I don't think anyone's still listening. I think.
What are you driving?
I think they check out when we do the outro.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm driving. I've been talking about the 2024 Toyota GR Corolla. We've talked about this on the show last year, but this year I live in an area with lots of gravel roads, like I was just talking about. So I'm kind of do like a gravel express test on the vehicle and see how it handles when you're not on like a perfectly smooth racetrack.
Perfect. Be safe.
Always.
Okay. I'll talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.